They're back. A new Labor government with a big mandate will populate the front and backbenches today as Parliament finally returns. And opposite them, a much reduced coalition still licking its wounds from the worst election defeat in its 80-year history. Will we see Susan Lee at the helm of a new and improved Liberal Party? Or will it succumb to its profound policy fractures? And for Labor, can a new government rise to the challenge of change being demanded from a public hungry for reform? Tom, good to have you on the pod again.
Thanks, Reged. Great to be with you.
And Krishani, welcome back as well.
Thank you so much, Reged. Happy to be here.
Now, we will get to what we can expect from Labor and its big mandate later on, but I just want to start with the coalition first. You've both been taking a special look at this. Do you think we're going to see a change in tone in Parliament from Susan Lee compared to Peter Dutton?
I think there will be a change in tone. I think they're quite different people. I think Susan Lee brings a softer edge to her politics than Peter Dutton. It must be said, in the last Parliament, she was the deputy and was quite forceful and often the political attack dog for Peter Dutton. But I think the dynamics are going to be quite different. It's the first time we'll have a female opposition leader. She'll be going up against a pretty comfortable and confident Anthony Albanese as Prime Minister. Even in the last day or so, there has been signals from the coalition that they're going to be less combative on some policy issues like student HECS debt cancellation, acknowledging that Labor has won the election and that people want cost of living assistance. So I think there will be a shift in tone.
Yeah, just going to that point specifically around HECS, like it was a policy that during the election campaign they were vehemently opposed to, but we saw a massive shift just yesterday when John O'Doniam, the new shadow education minister, was on Insiders. There was a huge change in tone there, basically saying that, you know, they were pretty sure it would get through, they'd take it to their party room, but yeah, you can really see that sort of step back. I think the question time, which is normally the most combative hour of the sitting day, will in itself change a fair bit, because just having a woman in that chair, in the opposition chair for the first time, I think will also kind of make some of those government ministers or the Prime Minister himself also kind of think a little bit more about how combative or how sort of much of a screaming match there is in QT as well. Like, it doesn't sort of look as good when you're shouting or screaming at a woman. So that in itself might change a little bit too, the dynamics.
That's really interesting. Do you think the Prime Minister will be mindful of those optics?
I think he might have to be. It's something that I know the opposition has spoken about privately as well, that they expect that he will have to do so. And it's probably something that he and his team are pretty conscious of.
I must say, I don't think Susan Lee's going to be backwards in coming forwards. She's quite a forceful presence herself.
Totally.
And perhaps that dynamic might suit her, that Anthony Albanese needs to be a bit more careful. A man yelling at a woman is probably a bit different to a woman yelling at a man. However, how question time is received in voters' minds on the 6 o'clock news or whatever on TV is something that the politicians do think about. It can look pretty weird, adults acting like children in Parliament, I think.
Look, you've both sort of flagged some policy areas, and I'm wondering what the most difficult area for the coalition is going to be in terms of being unified on, especially as they're reviewing all of their policies. It's all up for grabs.
I think net zero is one of the urgent challenges. We've covered this in our series on the Liberal Party rebuild. I think the coalition is going to be divided on this. There are plenty of Liberals who think that net zero is the least they can do on the transition to renewable energy and cutting Australia's climate emissions. There are some Liberals who are opposed to net zero policies who think Australia is going too far out and hurting ourselves economically for a goal that is probably going to be lost on the international scene. On the other side of the coalition, the Nationals are increasingly opposed to net zero. There's some big players in that party room who are pushing for a change in policy, people like Matt Canavan and Barnaby Joyce. My expectation is that the Nationals will be opposed to net zero, and that's going to be really difficult for Susan Lee and the Liberals.
Yeah, it was one of the things that really was an undercurrent of that split as well early on between the Liberals and the Nationals. And one of the things that some Liberals in the party had sort of hoped that, if there was a more permanent split, it would make it easier to be able to form a more solid position on net zero and on climate change. So I know one of the things that they're hoping to change a lot from the last iteration of the coalition under Peter Dutton is focusing a lot more on economic policy. There might also be a little bit of tension there, but net zero is the big one.
Do you think we're going to see a uniquely divisive time now for the party? I know we've been reporting on some suggestions that Tony Abbott is still working in the background trying to take the party further to the right. Is this a real danger point for Susan Lee?
It is, and there is definitely a lot, particularly when it comes to policies like net zero, there will be a lot of division there. At the outset, it seems like particularly her supporters are pretty comfortable with their numbers in the party room. They sort of feel like enough of the key senior players, even those on the Conservative side, have pulled around her. But there is definitely still a lot at risk. There's a few backbenchers who have been speaking out a lot, trying to make kind of their own mark, despite the fact that Susan Lee is kind of trying to bring them in through this backbench committee type process to get a more direct line from the backbench to her and the shadow cabinet. I know, having spoken to some of her supporters, they say that she's well placed to fend them off and fend off some of those, Abbott-aligned Conservatives within the party room. The moderates have said that they kind of wish that Abbott would go away. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see.
How is that going to manifest in how we see Parliament play out when we sort of watch it on our television screens, that relationship with the backbench and much reduced front bench as well?
Yeah, I mean, the whole Liberal Party National Party coalition ranks is going to be much reduced. The numbers are going to be quite striking. And of course, the way the visual element of Parliament plays out is we can see the numbers and their slim down offering to voters right in front of us. It's going to be fascinating. Labor's going to have to keep their victory in check a bit. I think the Prime Minister's concerned that there could be some hubris or, gloating from the big Labor numbers, and their caucus is going to be much bigger. Just watching them all file in for question time on Wednesday is going to be fascinating.
Could be something.
Why is that?
Well, you see new people on the front bench, you see the huge mass of Labor MPs. The crossbench is going to be further around the Parliament, closer to the coalition, and it's going to be quite stark seeing how few Liberals and Nationals there are. Even in the last Parliament, when you looked at the opposition benches, you could see that they had a problem with renewal. There were lots of ex-ministers from the Morrison, Turnbull, Abbott years, and lots of people that thought that they should be on the front bench. Some of them have lost their seats now, and some of their front benches are gone as well. And even things like the mechanics of Parliament, Alex Hawkes, the new manager of opposition business, he'll go up against Tony Burke on tactics. That'll be interesting to see. This new reality is dawning quickly for both sides.
Is there anyone else that you're going to be watching for as journalists, keeping an eye on their performance?
I'll be watching lots. I think Ted O'Brien as the new Shadow Treasurer will be fascinating up against Jim Chalmers. People like Angus Taylor in defence. Krishani, who will you be looking for?
I think Foreign Affairs as well, like the Michaelia Cash operation will be very different to Simon Birmingham. Obviously, Simon Birmingham was a moderate, and we had already started seeing quite a lot of splits between the coalition and the government, where in a policy area where there has tended to be sometimes a little bit more bipartisanship on international fronts. And Michaelia Cash takes a much more conservative stance on that as well.
How do you think success is going to be measured for Susan Lee in these first few days?
It's something that I asked a lot of the Liberal members that I spoke to around what are the kind of metrics for her, both in the short term and the long term. It's kind of difficult because it's not like they're going to be able to land on positions very quickly. It's not like they're going to be able to see, on measures like gender quotas, for example, or increased representation. That's a really long-term goal. Within the first couple of days, I think everyone will be really watching how she handles the government and pushes back against Anthony Albanese, particularly in an era where they've said that they want to collaborate more and be less of a sort of coalition. It is still a fine line, though, being able to, for an opposition, stand their ground and show a difference between them and the government and push back. And, they've said that they want to make sure that the government doesn't get too too much hubris.
These first few days, I think, might be partially more superficial. You know, do they look united? Does she look like a strong leader up against Anthony Albanese? And some of the things that would usually be day-to-day routine decisions take on greater significance. Are they going to ask questions about AUKUS and the defence relationship and the PM's inability to get a meeting with Donald Trump? Or are they going to focus on cost of living in the economy or the productivity summit, that kind of thing? We'll be watching like hawks, and sometimes things that aren't as important take on greater relevance.
So, Krishani, Labor has a big mandate. We'll see that presence in Parliament. What is Labor's most immediate legislative priorities as they finally come back to government?
So the two that will be mainly focused on this week is HECS, which they said they would legislate, bring to Parliament the first day that it comes back. So that's shaving 20% off existing HECS debts. The other one, of course, is childcare, which is completely blown up over the last few weeks. Scandals across different childcare centres across the country. It's something that they've said, you know, they will try and crack down on within this fortnight. It's something that the coalition has also said that they want to make sure gets done, but they want to push the government a little bit further.
What about things like housing and the Environmental Protection Agency?
Housing's one where the rubber really starts to hit the road. You might say in the last Parliament, they legislated a lot of different programs and targets. Now it's about actually building. A lot of that does also lie with the states and territories. On the environment, Murray Watt was probably the fastest minister to kind of come out of the gate, do a whole round of interviews with the media, including The Guardian, about legislating a new Environmental Protection Agency, a big piece of legislation that fell over at the end of the last Parliament. It is one that they will have to follow. I know Murray Watt's been meeting with a lot of stakeholders and groups. There's a lot of pressure within Labor as well, within their own ranks, to come up with this legislation urgently.
I think the environment stuff is playing into the productivity summit. Obviously, that's locked down for the middle of August, and people like Ken Henry are making the case that fixing environmental laws feeds into productivity. That summit will be fascinating. It could put new things on the agenda that Labor hasn't canvassed so far. Equally, it could be a talk fest and not result in very much. The other issues I think that are bubbling away include cost of living and, of course, the kind of headwinds that people like Jim Chalmers talk about in management of the economy generally, one of them being Donald Trump's trade war. It's not a legislative priority necessarily, but it underpins lots of the government's decision-making, I think.
What about dental and Medicare? We've seen that conversation start this week. The Greens have the balance of power in the Senate. We've heard they might push it, but is Labor really likely to respond to that pressure?
I mean, it's one of those things that Mark Butler has said is in their long-term agenda. It's on the national platform, but is something that is quite difficult and very expensive to try and do. I know so far there's obviously a very clear list of priorities that the government and that Labor has put forward that they campaigned for during the election, and have kind of created a space where they don't really want to go too far beyond what they've already announced and promised. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. The Greens have said that they might block legislation to try and get that on the agenda, but we saw, for example, what happened during the last Parliament when they were trying to block legislation to get negative gearing and capital gains tax changes, legislative changes, and that didn't really go particularly far. So it'll be interesting to see how they do kind of debate and fight over this issue, but it is a really complicated one. And, yeah, not particularly sure how much appetite the government has to really go there within the next 3 years.
Do you think Labor's a little bit on borrowed time? The public gave them a big mandate, but how much impatience is there in the electorate to really get answers to some of the big questions that Australia has to contend with?
It's a good question. I mean, these people spend their whole lives trying to deal with exactly this kind of thing. What's the urgent burning platform that they need to address? What are things that voters might turn on a dime on, not care about 1 week and then the next care deeply about? Exactly the strategy there, the timeline, how they roll things out will be fascinating. Krishani's right about housing. It needs action every day for the next decade probably to meet targets. So they want to push in that area. That might take a long time. Dental and Medicare is another example, an urgent problem, people with serious shortcomings in their dental care waiting for help, a problem that gets worse when you don't address it, a health problem like that can lead to other conditions and really impact people's lives. But the reality is it's going to cost billions of dollars. So how that decision works into planning, into things like policy commitments at election time, deal making with the Greens is fascinating. My thought on that is probably it's some years away. Labor very much viewed in the long-term priority category, and the Greens like it as an issue to push, but whether they can go to the mattresses and hold everything up to really try and get that across the line, I'm not sure. As Krishani says, it didn't work so well on housing in the last parliament.
Just finally, we've talked about divisions in the Liberal Party. What about Labor? Are we going to see Jim Chalmers and Tony Burke jockeying to be the next Prime Ministers, or is it all stars and sunshine because the election result was so great?
There's stars and sunshine in the immediate forecast. However, these are professional politicians. They've all got ambition and ego. There will be tension. On policy as well, people within the caucus will be frustrated at the pace or ordering of things. It's inevitable. It always happens. And Labor can paper over it. And I think Anthony Albanese's done a good job of keeping people at the table and limiting infighting or people speaking outside their briefs. But it's a big new caucus, lots of people elected for the first time, and there'll be testing of boundaries.
In the long term as well, there are obviously so many people, 94 within that Labor caucus, and there's only a certain number of leadership positions and promotions that people can get. But yeah, I think one of the things that we will be watching out for is, while it's all sunshine and rainbows at the moment, Labor does have the most political capital it'll have in a long time right now over the next year.
Great point.
And so there will, I imagine, be some within the party who have been wanting to see changes on certain policies, even things like gambling. At the moment, there's not really been a whole lot of chatter behind the scenes. But if things don't kind of change, then there might be a bit of pushing on that issue like there was in the last parliament on others as well.
One relationship that I think is interesting in this regard, not that it'll be infighting, but competitive tension, Anthony Albanese and Jim Chalmers. One is more cautious and looking at the long-term future of the government. The other wants to deliver big reforms, wants to build his own reform legacy as Treasurer. There could be some competitive tension there. We often see that between Prime Ministers and Treasurers. Then when you look at the leadership thing, as you allude to, Reged, there are a few people that consider themselves in the mix once Anthony Albanese picks up sticks and retires in 5 years or whenever it is. And there will be other people in the cabinet who are unhappy with their lot and think that their policy priorities should be higher up the list, or indeed that they should be more senior. It's inevitable. We'll be looking for it. We'll be reporting it as soon as we can.
Krishani, Tom, this new parliament is going to keep you very busy, and you'll keep us informed along the way. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Reged.